American distributors have canceled their orders with us.
Canadian businesses are scrambling and the Canadian government is retaliating as the U.S. brings in 25% tariffs on all foreign steel and aluminum. There was a one-day threat yesterday that the levy would be increased to 50%. The uncertainty is wreaking havoc for companies that rely on steel and aluminum. Now, one of those industries is beer making. These tariffs will impact breweries on both sides of the border. So for more on this, we've brought together two beer makers. Josh McJannett is the co-founder of Dominion City Brewing Company in Ottawa. And joining us from Buffalo, New York is Jeff Ware. He is the president of Resurgence Brewing Company. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Josh, I do want to start with you first, and let's talk about the 25% tariff that is now in effect from the U.S. How is that going to impact your business?
Well, look, I mean, I think the overwhelming feeling is one of uncertainty. Yesterday, it could have been 50%. Today, it's 25. By 3 o'clock this afternoon, it could be 85. I don't know. I think, honestly, the feeling of being overwhelmed is on purpose. I've certainly been feeling a little overwhelmed, but I think everybody really just needs to kind of tether themselves to what little they control. That's what I'm trying to do. We just run a small brewery here in Ottawa. There are 30 cars parked out front every day when I come in, and there's 30 people who go back and pay rent and put food on the table with what we do here. And I feel a responsibility for that. So I want to focus on the things we control. And I think my message is governments in Canada need to focus on what we control. And I think Canadians are looking for something to do. And there are things they can do.
You know, we'll touch on what Canadians can do in a moment, too. Jeff, I want to bring you into this conversation because you're a U.S.-based brewer and you're relying on Canadian aluminum, to put beer in cans. So how are these tariffs impacting your ability to meet the demand for consumers?
Yeah, I mean, we sure do rely on it. Most of the cans that we get, if not all the cans, are either coming from Canada or the aluminum to make the cans is coming from Canada. So it's going to hit us one way or another. And, these tariffs are not going to be split by the can manufacturers. They're going to come right to us. And then we're going to have to decide, do we eat that margin or do we pass it on to the consumer? Both not great things for our brewery or for the local beer scene.
In terms of then, Josh, what you're dealing with, is it something that could be passed on to the consumer? Is that something that you're looking at as well?
I joke that we're like the firefighters of Canadian manufacturing. We've been running into a burning building. Our industry's actually opened very small scale manufacturing in communities across the province and across the country. Not many industries have done that. And as a consequence, our margins are not tremendous, but our pricing power is also not tremendous. And I think one of the real concerns and the risks is what happens to consumer demand for a product that is not an essential. And in that sense, I think passing on those costs, like Jeff alluded to, it's not obvious that consumers will bear that, particularly in this moment. And we have to be very careful about that. And I know that's been on our mind here.
So then, Jeff, if, the way forward, the alternative at this stage doesn't appear to be, doesn't appear to be passing that cost on to consumers, perhaps it's something that is absorbed. Is there another alternative? Can the materials that are required for producing these cans, can that be sourced elsewhere?
The short answer is no. I mean, we really think cans are the best package for our beer. Really, the two things that hurt beer the most are light and oxygen. Cans are a great option for protecting from those. And they're also very versatile. Beer drinkers want to enjoy their beer on boats, on the beach, hiking. You can throw cans into a backpack. So we really think it's the optimal solution. And there's no real other viable option for a company of our size. To Josh's point, we're a small brewery that's just trying to make it work. And we already have immense cost pressures after COVID. And this is one more cost pressure that's just going to have to be swallowed or passed on. And neither of them are good options for us. They both put us in a really hard spot.
I want to ask the same question for both of you, and that is that ultimately we had heard from the U.S. president who initiated the trade war and the tariffs that we're seeing in place now, that essentially this is in order to bring manufacturing back to the United States of America, to stop sourcing out to other countries. Do you think that that might be accomplished by these tariffs when you're looking at specifically your industry? And you know what? I kind of want to go back to you for a moment, Jeff, because you mentioned that there's not really an alternative for you. And then Josh, the same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the goal long term. I think one of my questions I have is, what is the goal? What's the plan? What's the timeline? Because, that sounds great long term, sure. But for me, we're just trying to get through the next 6 months, couple of years here. And I'm not a politician. I can't speak to the macroeconomics of North America, but I can tell you it's going to hurt us in the short term and make it real hard for us to continue doing business.
And what about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I've made my peace with is none of this makes sense in any logical or rational way. I think what we're stick handling is some kind of a ketamine-infused fever dream about annexing Canada, and it's never going to happen. We just have to live with it. And I think this is where I go back to tethering ourselves to the things we control. For us, that's teaming up with other breweries, making a Canadian beer, reinvesting in our communities. I think for governments, that's doing things like addressing policies that keep us uncompetitive. We pay the highest beer taxes in the country here in Ontario. We could do that with a pen stroke here at Queen's Park and deal with that now. And I think finally for consumers, it's choosing to support us. We're feeling that support, Canadians making the deliberate choice to support Canadian products. And we're going to need a heck of a lot more of that if we're going to make it through this.
Josh, you had spoken about that is being one of the things that Canadians can do that support Canadian business. Certainly, we've seen that from a lot of our federal politicians. Jeff, that's not necessarily an approach that you'd like to see. You're just over in Buffalo, New York. Certainly, a lot of Canadians come over there. I'm wondering what your message to Canadians is and what you've been noticing with that being the message to buy Canadian.
Yeah, I think like Josh was saying, we can only control what we can control. And this is something that's out of our control. So half of our community is Canadian. We're right on the border. If you do a bullseye around Resurgence, it's half American, half Canadian. We rely on those customers to come down and, come to a hockey game, come to dinner, come have some beers at the brewery, take beer back with them on their way home from their trip. So that's going to have an equally big effect on our business as we run a large tap room and banquet facility here. And so we're kind of in a situation where we're getting with double whammy. It's increased costs on production and our beer going out to wholesale. But also we're going to lose, a significant portion of our customer base, which rely on to, really keep the lights on.
Josh and Jeff, I want to thank you so much for really painting the picture for Canadians as they try to digest these new tariffs and the real life picture of this trade war. That is Josh McJannett. He is the co-founder of Dominion City Brewing Company in Ottawa, and Jeff Ware is the president of Resurgence Brewing Company in Buffalo, New York. Thank you to you both.
Thank you for having me.
Great day.